All right.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to the second installment of the Career Expert Panel Series. Today's session is called How to Make Your Resume Stand Out. My name is Patrick Roberts. I'm Associate Director of ECU Career Services, where I oversee the marketing and technology, and I'll be serving as a moderator for today's session. First, let me welcome everyone and say, during COVID and emphasizing that hopefully everybody is staying healthy. That is our first priority. Second to that would be that you're staying sane and that you see some of these career panels and this engagement with alumni as an opportunity not only to connect with fellow pirates, but also to get some professional development, maybe take a break from your usual workload. And our goal with these sessions really, again, is to create a sense of community and to make it so people can connect. And we hope that when we do get to campus again, that this can start that conversation and encourage you to connect face to face when we are able to again. So for the session today, I do want to say that we have sent a set list of questions to the panelists, and we're going to leave some time for questions. But if you do have questions as we go through today, please make sure that you do type those in the chat. We do have Mary on the call from Alumni Association. She's going to be monitoring the chat for us today. So if you do have questions, please type those in and we'll jump in with those questions during the conversation. And just a reminder that the session today is being recorded. So anything that we talk about, we're going to be posting this session on the Alumni Association page for other alumni to have access to as well. So with most of the housekeeping out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. So how about we get started with you, Susan? Can you take a moment, introduce yourself, tell us your name, employer, and title, as well as when you graduated and then what department you came from?
Certainly. My name is Susan. I'm a graduate from 1983. I graduated with a degree in social work and did work in that field for a couple of years before I got a broken nose and a couple of broken limbs and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So I moved from there and have been doing that ever since, a little bit over 30 years now. Currently, I work for Hanes Brands headquarters, yes, the underwear people, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I recruit across all disciplines for all 50 states. I don't do any of the international recruiting yet, but do all of the domestic.
Great. Ron, how about you?
Okay, my name is Ron Jones. I am a career counselor at Davidson County Community College in Thomasville, North Carolina. I was the health careers counselor at one time. I'm a graduate of East Carolina, finished in 1984. I was a psychology major, and at that time I minored in business as well, and have been in the counseling field about 22 years or so, but I had been in previous jobs have been in sales and marketing. So I've had a pretty well-rounded work career.
That's great. And so to get started, and this goes right into what you were just talking about, Ron, with your background in sales and marketing, and it's kind of the title of today's presentation, but what stands out to you both when you look at resumes, whether initially or when you're looking through a resume for specific things, what stands out?
Well, for me, go ahead, Susan. Were you?
No, Ron, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. For me, reviewing resumes and things like that, the biggest thing for me is like appearance, the way the resume is set up, how things are spaced out on the resume. I like to see a resume that's very clean, easy to read, something that I can look at and pick up the skills of what somebody has pretty easily.
And one, I actually have two issues because I work for a huge employer that has an applicant tracking system, an ATS. And the first thing, the resume's got to get through that applicant tracking system for me to even be able to see it. Again, echoing what Ron said, something that's clean, something that's in not too fancy of a font, not a lot of graphics, not a lot of boxes, not a lot of any kind of pictures in it, because it's not actually going to get to me. Now, once you get past that applicant tracking system, I do like the resumes that have the graphics and everything in it, but you've got to get to a human being to be effective. So again, clean. Tell me something about yourself that is meaningful. Don't just copy something from a template, because I've been doing this long enough to know that I will be able to be absolutely genuine in what you're doing, and give me enough information to ask you questions. But don't give me everything, because if I have everything, I may not need to call you.
Right.
That's right.
All right. Susan, could you tell us a little bit more? This wasn't a question that we had sent you, but you're talking about it now, so I think it's a good time to bring it up. But and Ron, you can jump in too. But any specific advice that you might have related to applicant tracking systems? I know that a lot of large corporations are using applicant tracking systems, also known as ATSs. So if you could just talk a little bit about that, since you have a little bit more background and experience looking at the back end of those.
I have been using applicant tracking probably for the last 12 to 15 years. Different names, but they basically all do the same thing. Due to the huge number and volume of people that we have applying for the positions, companies simply have to have some kind of a computer system to be able to slice and dice those resumes. So what they do is once you apply for the position, they look at your resume and they parse it. Unfortunately, parsing is always not perfect. And the more curly cues and informatics and graphics and boxes and shadowing you have, the less likely it is that that parse is going to be correct. If that parse isn't correct, you may not make a cut from the ATS system to actually get to me as a human being. So that's why I'm saying you may actually need two resumes, one that is formatted to get past an applicant tracking system, and in particular, if you're in marketing or graphics or design or one of the creative fields, you may want to have a resume that shows off those skills and use that when you actually interview with a human being. I know applicant tracking systems can be frustrating to job seekers. They can also be frustrating to recruiters. So utilize, in addition to applying for jobs on the applicant tracking system, make sure you're using your networking skills. I highly recommend LinkedIn to connect with people in other ways as well.
Okay, great. And so is there a specific format for the applicant tracking that you see to be successful? Would it just be using a plain Word text?
Plain Word text, either an Arial or a Times New Roman font. Putting your name and your address and your contact information at the top of the resume. Basically the old time resume that you want your contact information at the top. Then if you're going to have a summary or objective, do that next. Then under that, either doing your education or your work history, either one, it will pick up. And then taking that all the way down to the bottom. So just being as boring as you can possibly think of being in the format. But do, like I said, do make sure that you're getting good information. And that way, to parse correctly in an ATS.
Great. On any other additions to that?
Yes, I would say go in, look at your job description, look at your job posting, and make sure that the words that are required as minimum qualifications on that job posting show somewhere in your resume. Because again, that's how the ATS system is going to spit it to me, saying you're qualified or not. So in your objective, in your job description, in your classes, if you want to list classes, talk to me in the same language that the job posting is talking to you in. Real pirate secret, won't share this with everybody on the planet because it is so cheap. But if indeed you don't have a lot of the qualifications that are listed in my job posting, go on that resume, the very top or the very bottom, put it in a white font so it won't show up, and put in some of those keywords. That way you'll get past the applicant tracking system to me, a human being, and I'll actually be able to talk to you. Now make sure when you bring me an in-person resume that it doesn't have that on there anymore, because I will see it then. That is a trick to get you past that applicant tracking system. My fellow recruiters, I told you that.
That's good information.
Yeah. Ron, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's great information. I'm not as familiar with the tracking systems, although I've heard a lot about, don't put a lot of, bells and whistles on your resume that might get kicked out. One thing that I know I try to do is to let people know, make sure about your spelling and your grammar too. Have somebody look it over, make sure that it reads right, because I can't tell you how many times I've read resumes, especially coming into the college, because we do interviews and things there. Grammar, spelling errors, things like that. I mean, that can get you knocked out in a heartbeat.
Absolutely, and spell check isn't enough, because I tell you manager is a correct word, and it is, but you were me a manager, so you got to have human eyes look at that, and after you have to get other people to look at it for you.
Right. Get another pair of eyes to look at it, very definitely.
So that really goes into the next question here, which is, Is there anything specifically people should avoid on their resume? And why don't we start with you, Ron?
Okay. Well, think about things like, and a resume is a little different than an application. I would avoid anything, relating to age, any kind of political affiliations, religious type things. You're trying to screen yourself in. You don't want to screen yourself out or put something controversial in there that may, get your resume tossed out. So, especially age, I'm an alumni. A lot of times certain things can age you on there. So just be careful with those type of things.
Oh, Susan's muted. Hold on. There you go.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say, I agree so much with Ron. Anything that's in a protected class, age, race, religion, marital status, children, any of them do not want to put on your resume. That can kick you out before you ever get started. And that's not fair and not legal, but it happens in the real world. So don't put that information on your resume.
Right. And one thing that I've seen a lot with some students is them including a picture.
I know it's the new world. And I'll have to say, for me personally, I don't want to see that. I don't want to give my hiring managers that option. Having, like I shared with you before the call started, is we are getting ready to go to having candidates actually provide a video in addition to their application. And so it's going to be there. But the old time recruiter still says here, let's don't do it until we have to.
So one other question, and this might be only relevant for you, Susan, since Ron, you work in career services, but actually, there might be some people interested in working in career services. So, but do you have any specific questions related, or I'm sorry, any specific advice that you might have related to crafting a resume for your specific industries?
Well, Hanesbrands is a textile industry. However, with about 70,000 wide, we have almost every job you can possibly think of in the manufacturing function. So not really anything indicative of the industry other than going back to the specific job that you're looking at and getting those key words in there. I will say that I do have some hiring managers that are very concerned with GPAs for new graduates. So right. If you have a stellar GPA, list it. If it is not stellar, don't list it. You can talk about that, and very honestly, there may be other reasons. You may have worked full-time, went to school full-time, you may have had a family, you may have had children, there may be you don't have a 4.0. But if you've got it, advertise it. Also, when you start your work experience, which may be limited, I understand if you're a new graduate, feel free to talk about part-time jobs. Feel free to talk about volunteer experience. And give me something as a recruiter that I can quantify. If you're saying you worked for your sorority and you were the treasurer, give me money amounts. Give me dollar figures of what you did. Give me something that I can quantify with numbers so I can tell how much of it you did. Did you do it a little bit or did you do it a whole lot? So give me something to get my teeth into.
Ron, what about you?
Well, and I agree with what Susan is saying. You got to think about a resume. It's a sales brochure. You're selling that recruiter or employer why you're the best candidate. So you want to make sure the information you put on there is stuff that's going to pique their interest. It's going to say, hey, I'd like to call this person in. They sound very interesting. So, it's a resume is a little different than an application. You're trying to persuade them to give you a call.
And so while we're talking about that, and then, we could go off on a whole nother conversation about everybody has different things that they prefer on resumes. But one really common area of debate is listing an objective or a summary statement on the top of your resume. What are your preferences? What are your thoughts on objective versus summary, objective or summary statement? Why or why not?
Okay. You want me to go first?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Ron, is it you or me?
No, it's you. Go ahead.
Okay. I really, as a recruiter, don't mind if you have an objective or a summary, or if you don't. In my opinion, typically I see a summary with a more experienced candidate that is highlighting the things that they have done throughout your career, and an objective I see more with an inexperienced candidate. The challenge is, though, most of us, when we first get out of college, really don't have a good idea of what we want to do. We know we just need to get to the job market. So unless you have a specific idea of what you want to do, I would avoid the objectives because otherwise they're all going to sound the same. If you graduated with an accounting degree and you want to work in accounting because you eventually want to pursue your CPA and you need that oversight, then that's a perfect thing to put an objective. However, if you're in a sales or marketing arena and you don't have a specific title that you're going after, you may not want to put an objective on there. I'm not going to kick you out because you don't have an objective, but I might kick you out because your objective doesn't match the job I'm looking to fill. Okay. So I have to be careful about that.
Yeah. I prefer, I like having a summary or an objective on a resume. In a way, I kind of get to know that person a little more before I really start reading through their resume. It is also a way to see what their writing skills are about too. Can you voice, what it is that you're seeking. So it's a way to kind of get an idea of who they are. I would say, and Susan, you'll probably agree with me too, if you don't use an objective or a summary, make sure you have at least a cover letter. And I know we may or may not talk about that, but make sure you have some way of introducing yourself to the employer.
And that is so true. In my world, if I get a resume, it's going to come through that applicant tracking system, either fortunately or unfortunately. So I'm going to know what position you've applied for. But IC's where I would like to see that summary and that information is, I want a good LinkedIn profile because it's identified that I want to talk to you. Guess where I'm going next?
That's right.
Check out and see what is your LinkedIn profile. Does it say something in addition to what you've already said on your resume? Does it give me a little more feeling for you? Does it allow me to get to know you a little bit better? Is it appropriate? So that is, I think most recruiters will tell you that is their go-to resource is LinkedIn, and also a great place to network. So that's where I kind of want to see that summary statement.
Good.
So you mentioned, go ahead, Ron.
I was going to say, please make sure your LinkedIn information and your resume kind of correspond. We don't want to see any surprises looking at one, because as a recruiter, that's one of the first places they're going to go is LinkedIn and your social media.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you mentioned two things that I'd like you to speak a little bit more on. One is LinkedIn. So any other things on LinkedIn when you're, talking with students or when you're looking at candidates that you really look for? Obviously, consistency with the resume is one. Anything else that you might look for on a LinkedIn profile?
I actually want to see something that actually is in addition to what's on that resume. I want to see something for personality, desires, about life goals, about what you do even for fun is good on there. That's truly a place where I feel like I get to know you. Also, I can look at your skills on there. And if I'm not mistaken, LinkedIn even has an application now strictly dedicated to students. It can be a great tool both in networking for jobs as well as for networking for information about the jobs once you've gotten them. So those are the kind of things I'm looking to see. And yes, I do want to see the same jobs listed that you had on your resume. Maybe here you can actually say, I'm looking at careers in X, Y, Z, or W. I'm not really certain, but I think this is the way that I want to go with long-term goals to do A, B, and C. So that's where, and there's where your picture comes in. You want a professional picture.
Right.
A lot of pictures on LinkedIn that aren't, but I'm looking for a headshot. You don't have to have it professionally done. Everybody can do one themselves. But yeah, I want to see a professional headshot when I'm looking on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, please be careful with the pictures you put on LinkedIn, because I've seen some on there. It's like, oh my goodness, you just be careful with that, because a lot of times that's the first impression somebody may have of who you are. So it's real important. And same thing with Facebook and other things, other social media too. Be careful what you have out there. Be aware of the brand that you're portraying.
Right. So this is just a plug for career services and our career fairs and alumni to know that they're open to all alumni, and we do offer free professional photos at all of our career fairs. So if you are struggling to get that professional photo done for LinkedIn, come to one of our face-to-face career fairs in the fall or the spring, and you're welcome to get one for free. And I agree. One thing that I'll add to what you guys are talking about with LinkedIn that I think is beneficial as well, especially with you, Susan, in the textile field, is there is an opportunity to upload works on there and different portfolio aspects. So again, if you're a recruiter looking for someone that would want to get a little bit more information on examples of work, that's a great place to put those things as well. So it's kind of like having your own personal website. While we're on the topic of LinkedIn, and then we'll move on, do you prefer to see a LinkedIn URL on their resume?
I like to see that, yes.
Okay. So
I
again,
do have a public profile that I can get to it easily, but that URL just helps me, just makes it easier for me. And if it's easier for me, you're probably going to get more attention.
okay, great. So something to note for those. Again, definitely adding that to your link or your resume, adding your LinkedIn URL there. So the other thing that you mentioned during the last question, resumes versus objectives, was a summary, or I'm sorry, a cover letter, and putting that on your as part of your application and your materials. I know this topic is not about cover letters today, but any tips or hints that you guys might have related to cover letters?
Cover letter.
Susan, I'll let you go.
I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
No, I'll let you go ahead first, and I'll catch up.
I was just going to say on cover letters, make sure that your writing is good, because again, that's where I'm going to be looking to see your writing skills. An ideal place for a new grad, someone's career shifting, is to be able to tell me that in a cover letter and how your skill sets that you have in one area relate to the skill sets that you'll need for another area. But do make sure it's one customized for every job. I can't tell you the number of jobs I got that tell me that, oh, they want to work for Microsoft. Well, I'm happy about that, but I'm not Microsoft. And make sure that you're getting the job title right. So make sure those are created individually and specialized for each and every job.
And I was just going to mention, it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out, letter, just maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs, a little introduction to who you are, maybe a little bit about your skills, and the fact that you'd like to be able to possibly set up a time to meet and talk with that person too. We don't need a biography of your whole life in your cover letter.
Yeah, we've seen that before. So definitely keeping it to 1 page then.
Absolutely.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. So that's a transition back to resumes. And do you have a preferred length of resumes that you look for?
I am fine with having a multiple page resume as long as you have something to tell me. I see a lot of filler. I don't want you making the margin really wide, but if you've got information you need to share, I'm fine with a 2 or 3 page resume. Now, one of the areas that I recruit for is IT, and they are notorious for having 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 page resumes, which does not make a recruiter happy, but it does make my hiring managers happy. So, but that's the only field that I've seen that my hiring managers really like, kind of an in-depth, you named everything you've ever worked on from the beginning of your career. But yeah, a 2-page resume is very common. I would think for most new graduates, 1 page would be adequate. But if you got information to give me, I'd rather have the information on 2 pages than miss something and I'll only have 1.
Right. I agree with you. And a lot of times, and Susan, I'm going by, the type of recruiting I used to do. If I've got 50 resumes I'm looking at, I may glance at them for 15, 20 seconds just to pick up those key skills and things like that. And, I'm just looking for that information. I may not have time to read through 2 or 3 or 4 pages. So, sometimes, just be careful with the length. I do think, for example, if somebody is applying for a federal job, they're going to want a little more information, probably more than 1 or 2 pages. It could be 3 and 4, depending on your background and things like that. And a lot of times people in the education field, and Patrick, I know you can probably speak about this, the curriculum vitae and stuff like that, they're going to want to know a little bit more information. But I'm like Susan, 1 to 2 pages maximum for me, unless you've got a lot of good information that's relevant to the job.
And I will be very honest on those IT resumes, as I may get 150 for any one job. Which ones are going to get read first?
Right.
There's 1 or 2 pagers. Those 12 and 15 pages are going to be the last thing I do. I have to do them, but they're not going to be the first ones I look at.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to pull up here and I'm going to put in the chat a resource that we have on our website called the Career Resource Guide. And inside that, there's a page that actually specifically talks about the difference between a CV and a resume, just so that those that are interested in pursuing a career in something like medicine, education, or academics, that's a different type of resume that, again, is a little bit more lengthy than what we're talking about today. We're mainly focused on resumes and work experience focused resumes. And I'm happy to provide that in the link here. And it'll be a link that anybody can access and download that whole PDF file. To go back to some conversation about resumes, this one specifically might be related to today and a lot of alumni on the call, but do either of you have any advice specifically for anyone that's looking to change career fields and build a new resume?
I'll be honest with you, that's a tough one to do. What you have to prove to me as a recruiter, that one, you have a valid reasoning and thought process for why you want to move into the new career. And then you have to showcase the skill sets that you have already obtained and how they would apply to the new position. As a recruiter, I'm not really crazy about functional resumes, but if you're a career changer, sometimes functional resumes will get my attention, whereas if I'm looking strictly at your work history, you might not get my attention quite as quickly. So consider a functional or a combination functional, where you got the functional areas where your experience is at the top, and then at the bottom, just a very brief listing of the dates and where you've been employed. If you are changing careers, in my opinion, networking is the #1 place to go. You need to get into professional societies. You need to use LinkedIn to find out who the managers are in those areas, because talking to manager, first line hiring managers, those people are going to be the people who know and understand how your skill sets relate to that job. An ATS system, and in all honesty, a recruiter that's got 70,000 people across the planet simply can't do that. So network. But you have a functional or combination functional will probably help in the resume.
Right.
I would agree with that very definitely. Networking is probably one of the best ways to find jobs and things too. So if you have introductions through LinkedIn and things like that, that's just greasing the wheels to get in there and find out what they're really looking for. So yeah, very definitely.
And I know this isn't a LinkedIn call, but I will offer to everyone on the call. I am a Lion. I am an open networker. I currently have 4,000 and something first degree connections, which makes my second degree connections over 1 million, and I don't even know what the third ones are. So anyone wants to send me a request to connect on LinkedIn, I'll be more than happy to do that, because that gives you more access to actually being able to talk to a wider range of people.
That's great.
Put your resume on LinkedIn. I've seen people doing that more recently. And again, you're going to get people's attention that way, but that's a shotgun method. And you're going to shoot a lot of shotguns before you actually hit somebody with that. A whole lot easier on your ego if you try a rifle approach. That I know I want X, Y, or Z job, and the people who are players in that field, and I've researched those people on LinkedIn. I've tried to make connections to them, and I'm going directly after those specific jobs. Tough to do when you're a new graduate, though. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. And I think one of the things, a key word that you guys are mentioning here with the transitioning to a new career field is that transferable skills. And again, we've mentioned it several times today, but just emphasize it for those on the call, which is, looking at the job description and asking yourself, what have I done before that relates to what I'm applying for in the future? And am I making that clear to the person that's going to look at this? Who's my audience and what are they going to be looking for? So that's definitely a key takeaway, especially as you transition into a new role. If you were a manager at a front desk and now you're going to be a manager somewhere else, well, you just might be managing something else now. So what are those transferable skills? Like, you're always going to be hiring people. You're always going to be training people. You're just hiring and training them in a different field, right? So it's really important. Another question that we've seen as a common trend in career services, and this relates again to today and people may be looking at transitioning to new roles. How do you feel about resumes that are using a unique format like infographics, websites, or video resumes? And you can just say you hate them, and that's okay, and we can move on.
Well, it's a new thing that's coming. As I told you, we're getting ready to start having every candidate actually send in a very abbreviated video, and that's going to be in the very near future. So I really haven't dealt with a lot of the video resumes yet. Personally, I like the infographics. I like the websites, particularly my creative fields and my design positions, my marketing positions. But you can't use those on that ATS system, because they're not going to be parsed correctly, and they're going to end up in the trash heap. So you get to a human being to use those. But once you get to a human being, I think those can be tremendously useful. And I know you, Grant, when you said that. Do the students not like the video resumes either?
No. They definitely do not like the video interviews. But
Yes, that's the truth. They don't.
And
Ron, what are your thoughts?
more of those, particularly with the COVID-19 right now. Just a quick question on the other side. What is it they hate about them?
I think it depends, but for my perspective and working in career services, especially the ones that are pre-recorded, it's harder to record yourself and not have a human that you can see their reaction and if you should keep talking or not. You know, it's that nonverbal cues are, am I going down the right path that you actually care about, or should I shut up now, or do I need to talk for 2 more minutes about this? And so I think that's probably the number one challenge with pre-recorded video interviews. And then the other thing is
Joe Leno monologue.
I'm sorry?
Kind of like a Tonight Show monologue.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is that they're just not used to it yet. Yeah. What about you, Ron?
No, I think, the way things are right now, I mean, that's the way interviewing is going to be for a while. I will tell you a funny thing. We used to do, interviews, practicing with students and things like that. And you always have to be aware of what's behind you when you're interviewing, because if you've got some provocative picture up, or a Bob Marley poster or something like that, what kind of image are you creating? So be aware of your surroundings if you do happen to be interviewing online, through Zoom or whatever. So
Yeah. Go ahead.
When you do your video interviews, also try to make sure that you've got lighting that's good. The lighting should be behind and above you, so it doesn't put a shadow on your face. If you've got a window very close to you, you have to be careful of what kind of shadow that's going to place on you, as well as the height of the computer and or your phone. So a lot of people do these video interviews on their phone. So you have to make sure that you're maximizing your ability to look your best. And when you first call in, when you're talking to an admin or a recruiter, before you get to that hiring manager, that is part of the interview. My admin to me on a regular basis and tell me, oh, someone was putting on a jacket when I walked in the door. Somebody was putting dishes in the sink when I walked in. It is the interview. So just treat the entire thing with the respect that it deserves.
That's right.
And one thing I'll add to that is, again, from career services, I know that we put some links in the chat here, one specifically with our alumni services, and one that I'll point out related to what we're talking about now is we do have a software called Interview Stream, and Interview Stream lets alumni practice their interviewing and record themselves and then watch themselves practicing and then give themselves feedback, as well as share that with someone that they might want to say, okay, how do I look? What's going on with my background? And I think one key that I would add to our advice today, not only with the background, is testing your connection and making sure you have a good webcam, you have good quality microphone. And then, of course, the other thing that I'll add, and I think this is pretty obvious, but we've seen it, is let everybody in the house know that you're interviewing.
That's right.
So, someone doesn't walk in and say, hey, the pizza's ready. And you're like, oops, no, I'm in the middle of an interview here. So definitely some things to think about related to virtual interviewing. So we're getting close to the end. Anything else you want to add?
That's it.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, make sure you tell your kids, hey, I've got to be, in this room for a while. Make sure it's quiet. Have your resume there that you can look at and go back on in case they ask questions of you. Make sure you have a pencil and pad to write down the information, because you may want to ask a question at the end of it too. So, yeah.
And I think that's an advantage that a lot of people don't talk about related to virtual interviewing, is that you can have some of your notes right in front of you there and be able to refer back to. So take advantage of that. Counter to that, though, is make sure you've closed out of all your web browsers and that you don't have your email up or anything that could distract you. You don't want to be getting Facebook messages while you're interviewed as well. So, well, that's
turn
great.
Your phone off.
Yeah, turn your phone off. Yep.
Yes.
We are getting towards the end of the session, though. I do want to make sure if there's anybody on the call that's joining us as a guest, that if you do have a question about your resume or about just in general, feel free to type that in the chat as we get close to the end here. One question that I have for the panelists, and this is so general, but it goes back to, what are some things that you prefer? But it's just really what makes a good resume? What looks good to you? You talked about formatting, but can you be more specific maybe on what type of formatting you look for and what are some issues that you've seen in the past related to bad formatting?
Good formatting has good white space. Take that resume and look at it, and realize as a recruiter, we're probably got about 30 seconds to make a decision on it. So you want to make sure there's enough white space around each area of your resume to make it stand out. You want to make sure the margins are not so wide that there's no white space on the side. Flip side, you don't want to make them so wide that it just looks like there's a column down the middle. I have seen those done. Bullets, I think, are very helpful rather than doing it in a prose style. Actually bullet it out. Again, that helps to make it cleaner and helps to make it more direct. A font size that is readable, and for me, anything below a 10 requires a microscope. So I would say 11 or a 12-point font. I don't read resumes on my phone, so I have to worry about that part of it. And again, a clean font, an Arial, a Times New Roman. I know there's a very boring. Georgia is another good font, just to make. That's what I'm saying when I say clean.
And I would agree. It's got to be easy to read, and you can go through and short statements maybe about the duties that you've had in your previous jobs. Something where I can kind of get a snapshot of a little bit about your skills and things like that, and say, hey, I'm gonna put this person in over here in the good pile, so I can go back and review it a little more. So, and Susan, you would probably agree with this. It is a screening process with resumes. If I've got to get 5 good candidates out of 100. I'm looking for things I can screen people out with. And so you have to really be careful. I will throw this out to you, and Susan, you may agree with this. Email addresses that you use, please use just, Red Hot Mama and Big Daddy Love and that kind of, I see that kind of stuff. Be careful with with email addresses and things too. So, because you can be judged by that.
Along the idea of addresses, I will also mention that now it seems to be very popular not to put any kind of an address at all on your resume. As a recruiter, I don't like that because I have some areas that I know they're only going to hire a candidate in Minnesota or in Arkansas. Having said that, the flip side of that is if you do want to be considered for somewhere other than where you're at, not putting it on there is more apt to get me to call you. But like I said, I personally am not a fan of it, but if you're trying to get called for anywhere in the country, it works.
Okay. And maybe a happy medium there might be put in parentheses next to the address, willing to relocate or something like that. So it's very clear that even if I'm in Greenville, North Carolina, I might be willing to go to Minnesota.
Yeah.
So we did have a question in the chat. They say they have 6 questions, so we'll get to the first one, and then we'll work our way through. But the first one here is just basically that in regards to the order of information, should veteran applicants put their experience first or education second, or does that matter?
Okay. I definitely want to see it because we hire a lot of veterans and we see a lot of skill sets working very well with us. For me as a recruiter, it's easier if you do it chronologically. So however your military just came into play is where you'd want to put it. So what I see most people do is if they're new graduates, their new graduate degree, their new degree first, then their work experience, and then at the bottom they actually take out a separate part and it says military experience. That's what I see most common. I don't really have a preference of where it's at as long as it's on the. It's critical. Some people try to leave that off, and I can tell you as a federal government contractor, we want to see the vets.
Okay. Yeah. And so do you have a preference over education versus experience, being which one listed first?
For a new grad, I think education makes sense. When you've been in the world 10 years, you probably want with your work experience first.
Okay.
Right. I would agree. If you're a new graduate, maybe don't have that much work experience, I would definitely put the education towards the top third. As far as veterans, I think it's great to put that information on. I know a lot of times when I've worked with veterans, got to make sure that the way that you word your job duties are, it translates over into the civilian world. So be careful with that, because a lot of terms and things like that that you may use that are understandable to you may not be understandable to that recruiter. So make sure you can transition those words.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some online sources now that can help the vets with that, because we use them on the other side as recruiters to help us to decipher what they're saying. So look online. There's some things out there that can help you with that.
That's great. So that was one of 6 questions. I think JB is the person on the call. If he had another question, feel free to add that to the chat. We're getting close again to the end, so if anyone has any questions they'd like to add to the chat, we'll definitely mention those now. Before we do, though, as we wait for another question to come up, any last piece of advice related to resumes? We've talked about a lot of stuff today that definitely could be taken away and help our alumni have an advantage. Any last piece of advice?
If indeed you really want a position, then you will have one resume for an ATS designed for that job. You will have a personal or a human being resume designed for that job, and you will tweak it for every single job you go out to. You will customize it. In reality, most people are not going to do that, but those are going to be the resumes that get the most and quickest attention.
I was just going to suggest that make sure your resume is up to date. Make sure it's got the most relevant information on there. I've seen resumes that, maybe somebody wrote 3 and 4 years ago, and they just happened to cut and paste something there on the resume. It's not even in the same font. And Patrick, I'm sure you can attest to this too. If there's a job fair locally somewhere, make sure you've got your resumes ready so that you can attend those job fairs.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, let's see. It doesn't look like any other. Oh, we have some questions in the chat here. Sorry, my chat wasn't all the way loaded. So, does ATS systems eliminate a resume over 1 page? Also, what keywords do ATSs prefer? And I think just to answer that question, it would be the probably what's in the job description, right, Susan?
Feedback the words that are in the job posting, and it depends on how the company has their ATS configured. Ours will accept any length of resumes, but a company can configure it to how many pages they desire.
And then does ATS eliminate any resume over 1 page?
That's a company thing, how they have their system configured. Ours does not, but you could configure a system to do that.
And is there any preferred templates that you would want to show or show on this presentation? We personally don't have a template here, but I would say that if you go to our website or if you visit ecu.edu/sample resumes, we have hundreds of resume samples by major and by industry listed for career services, and those are accessible to anybody that has an internet connection. I'll put that link in the chat here in a second.
And that would definitely be a great place to go with that. Like I said, I'm not as crazy about a particular template as I am just getting me the information that you need in a clean way.
So just a comment, and then maybe something that we could add some more thoughts on was related to, you mentioned putting your address, but did you know that companies are stealing personal information from resumes? Any thoughts on that?
I can guarantee that if it is a company with any integrity at all, that is certainly not happening. That is illegal. I can assure you, within Hanes Brands, your personal information is locked down so hard that if we hire you, you have a hard time getting your own information. I have seen that on numerous occasions. Like, no, I can't get your resume anymore. You got to go to your boss, and they got to go to VP, and they got to go down here. Lock it down tight. If they are doing that, in my personal opinion, it is certainly not somebody you want to work for.
So, and then what, in this specific job market with COVID and everything going on, is there a specific, any advice that you would give to help resumes stand out even further?
I know you're going to hate me for saying this, guys, but get good at doing those video interviews because it's going to be the case for right now. It's just with the COVID-19, we can't do people in person. So practice your monologue version, resume video, as well as doing live video interviews, because that's kind of be the way it's going to be. Probably, my guess is for the next year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Susan. I think that's just the way it is for right now, and the way the technology is changing so much, I mean, that could be the wave, for the future. So we do have to adapt to that type of technology.
Yes. So one thing, another question related to that was, how do you know there's thousands of companies posting on LinkedIn, and how do you know if they're legit? One thing I'm going to share in one resource that we've developed in career services here, and then I'll let you guys speak on it as well, is we do have a kind of format for how you can tell if a company is legit. And we actually have an employer relations team that specifically monitors our job posting system. And I would say that that's one thing for all the alumni on the call, that you should be starting not with something like LinkedIn for your job search. You should be starting with exclusive resources that you have access to as an ECU alumni. That includes Handshake, where legitimate positions are posted. You can use the internet and something like LinkedIn, but it's the Wild West of whoever wants to post anything anywhere on the internet can post anything they want. So I did post a resource to identify fraudulent employers. And then that includes when they ask for things like personal information. But again, I would start with legitimate resources that your school or your alumni have promoted, like ECU Connect and like LinkedIn, where there are legitimate employers. And most likely you're going to see very similar positions posted on both if they are legitimate with employer. But anything you guys want to add to that about knowing legitimate employers that you submit resumes to?
Definitely a red flag would be anybody asking you for a social security number. That should not happen. That definitely would be a red flag. Also check out my Better Business Bureau. If indeed I have a question on whether this company is legit, and most of the jobs in the country are with small employers, so you may not be familiar with their names, but check out the Better Business Bureau to make sure those companies are legit. Those are the people that you're actually talking with.
Right. And I'm about to put that in the chat as well, of the Better Business Bureau search, where again, that's a great piece of advice that our employee relations team uses. So if you see a company and you've never heard of them, search for them on the Better Business Bureau to see if they actually are a legitimate company as well. Any other things you want to add to that, Ron?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anybody's interested in working for the state, you can always go to the state's website and find jobs. You can look up, for example, if somebody want to work in the university system, you can go to any of the university websites, and they'll usually have a careers page or a jobs page, and you apply directly through there. So yeah, I agree with Susan. A lot of those websites you have to be careful of. So and if your gut feel, if it feels like it doesn't look right or something, then go with your gut feeling on that.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And going along with the asking for a social security number. Also, we've seen a lot of employers that ask for bank information. And that's, again, never give them any bank information or any personal information. You'll know that that's a pretty big red flag that that's not a legitimate employer.
Now, Patrick, I will say, once I've made you a verbal offer and sent you an offer letter and you sent it back, then I'm going to ask for that information because I need to get you set up for direct deposit. But it will not be after the offer has been made and you have accepted the offer.
And you probably are getting that from hr@hainesbrand.com. So that's a little different than, patrickroberts@gmail.com asking for your banking information.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. I think we've gotten through all the questions. I do want to say thank you for both of you taking the time today to be on the call and giving some really good, valuable advice to our alumni. We have one more question, and this is more of a fun question that we're asking panelists, but what's your favorite part of being an ECU alumnus?
You want me to go first? I'll be glad to.
Go ahead. Yep.
One of the things that's really fun, my wife and I like to travel, and I may be wearing an ECU hat or an ECU t-shirt. Invariably, I run into somebody that has their mother went to ECU, their sister, their cousin, their great aunt, or somebody. And it's fun to see how many people that you meet that just have that connection to East Carolina.
And mine would be, actually, I still have very close friends from 40 some years ago that I met at East Carolina University. We have been through marriages and divorces and kids and deaths and births, and that pirate spirit has held firm for all of those years. So those connections are definitely my favorite part.
That's great. That's great. So again, thank you both for being on the call today and really providing some great, valuable information. I'm going to turn things over to Mary now from the ECU Alumni Association to wrap things up and discuss some additional resources that are available to ECU alumni.
Yes, I want to thank everyone. Thank our panelists, Ron and Susan, for your time and for sharing your advice. And thank you for all of our participants for tuning in. Today's panelists can be found on our networking platform, ECU Connect. I did put that link in the chat. It's just ecuconnect.com. And that is our pirate network to use to locate fellow pirate alumni, faculty, and staff. You can find new job and career advice, learn about pirate events near you, and just keep updated on everything that is happening at ECU in your areas. So be sure to check that out. Just activate your profile again at ecuconnect.com. Additionally, we have our next installment of our career expert panels coming up next week on Tuesday, the 26th. We have keys to virtual interviewing. So I know there were a lot of times that came up during our conversation today. So be sure to check that out, where we have some additional new panelists that are going to be having that conversation. And you can go to piratealumni.com/career panels to check that out. Lastly, if you want to check out some of the other virtual and digital resources we have, you can go to piratealumni.com/digital resources. We also have tips coming out that our career services colleagues have been able to share, 10 tips in 10 minutes. So we have a new one released every week. So feel free to click on that link and get some additional resources that are being posted that can help you in your career journey. Again, a lot of those links have been posted in the chat for your reference. So thank you for joining us, and we hope that we will connect with you soon. And go Pirates!
Congratulations, everybody, on graduating.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.